Hello from the UBI4ME team. You have myself, Daniela, hello, and you have Marcel.
Hi there.
Um, as always, we meet the first Tuesday of the month at 16 in the or 4 o'clock in the afternoon UTC time to talk about issues surrounding universal basic income. And universal basic income has been in the press for quite some time. It has been talked about, and pilots have been run for a long time, at least since the 1970s. And our mission here is to go and spread the word to make sure that people understand what it is and why it would be good for them. And that is the reason why I am asking for a UBI for me, and that's where our name comes from. And for today, I would like to stick a little bit to the definition of UBI, what we think it is, how we would like it to be, and then we also would like to speak about one of the comments that has come through via our Mastodon account, where somebody had a few thoughts on what if, what when, and so on. So, Marcel, you've recently written an article about what UBI means, what the definition is. So, can I hand over to you to talk us through on the exact definition?
Yes, thanks, Daniela. I wrote the article primarily because there's a lot of confusion and a lot of debate around what UBI is, to try and just clarify things and to keep it as simple as possible. Because when people say, oh, UBI won't work because of this, then we need to do this to change it to form this, and it then murkies the water. So as a starting point, we want to work with the word universal basic income, UBI being universal basic income. Sometimes it's called unconditional basic income, but basically universal basic income is the common acronym for UBI. Universal is everyone without exceptions. So a lot of the time people talk about excluding certain people from the universal aspect to it. They say, oh, people who are criminals, or people who are non-residents, or people who, for whatever reason, don't deserve a UBI. There's always this classification of who should and shouldn't be eligible to earning the UBI, and we don't want to give it to people who don't deserve it. And criminals is quite often a common one. You know, somebody's being punished for committing a crime, and they should be continued to be punished. Foreigners, people who've recently arrived in the country, refugees are another group who they shouldn't be getting a UBI. They don't deserve it. They haven't lived in this country. Why should they be getting anything? And I think this is a key problem with the way people view things around the universal basic income. The main benefit about the universal basic income is that everybody has an income that they can then use to spend on goods and services within the economy and contribute to the economy. So you really want to make sure that everybody is getting a UBI because it benefits the economy. They're going to take that money and they're going to spend that money. You're not just giving it to people and they're going to squirrel it away. They're using that money to spend, to provide for their basic needs, whether it's the accommodation or food or whatever. You want to add something?
Yes, I would like to throw one thought in. When you say universal, that it's per person. It is not per household.
Yes,
It
and
is
that too.
per person. So that would then open up other beneficial side effects, that every person individually is treated the same way. So it's not like the patriarch gets the money and the housewife gets nothing. It's
Yes.
each individual person.
Yes, and again, if you give it to a household, it almost drives people apart because they want to each have their own household. You get a lot of single people living on their own just because a single person in a single household gets the UBI. And as soon as they, stay at home or partner up or whatever, they suddenly lose that, or they get halved or whatever. No, it is as an individual that we don't care how people live their lives. It's up to them to choose how they live their lives. Also, as you rightly point out, it goes to children as well. It's not just people above a particular age. So if you have a child, that child also needs to be fed and clothed and housed. So that individual also gets a UBI. Admittedly, the parents will be the ones that receive it, and to spend it on the child. But once the child has reached an age where they choose that they want to receive the UBI for themselves, not a particular age or whatever, the child should be able to choose when they want to be able to receive the UBI for themselves and do what they want with it, then they will be able to receive that UBI for themselves going forward. Because it's their UBI, it's an individual UBI. So yeah, it's the universal, and it's aimed at an individual. But my point being, from the universal side, is that everyone gets it, no exceptions. And the reason I say that is because so many people are focusing on the few people that may not deserve it. I really don't care about those few people. If people want to try and cheat the system, there's different ways of addressing that. If they're going to go for identity fraud or some other reason or something else that they shouldn't be in the country receiving the UBI, etc., then they are committing fraud and crimes that are covered anyway. People who aren't eligible for being in the country in the first place have a different set of problems anyway. So I don't think it's we need to worry about that, because we already have laws in place to protect against people that shouldn't be within a country, if that's what people are worried about. I think most of the Western world has a different problem, where they have a declining population and they really want to try and encourage people coming into the country so that those people can contribute to the economy, not just by spending their UBI, but also going out and doing something productive with their lives and contributing to the economy that way. So the bigger challenge going forward is trying to make sure that people who do deserve a UBI, in other words everyone, that we're not missing people, because there's going to be people that don't know how to register for a UBI, are unable to collect their UBI for whatever reason. There's a lot of homeless people, for example, that don't have bank accounts. How would they receive a UBI? How do we actually make sure that everyone is actually getting a UBI? Because one of the key things about UBI is addressing the poverty. It's there's people that are out of the system, that aren't able to find a home, aren't able to find a job, aren't able to get a bank account, aren't able to have an address, etc. These are the key people that we want to make sure receive a UBI, because that's how we address things like homelessness. If we give everybody some money, so they can find their own accommodation, find their own way forward in life, that they can make something of their lives. And a lot of the UBI pilots have shown that giving homeless people an income is a far cheaper way of addressing homelessness and getting people housed and things like that. And who cares why they're homeless? Who cares what happened to them? I saw an excellent little decision tree. Found a homeless person. Did they make bad decisions to be homeless? Yes or no? Didn't matter. Still, house them, give them, or in our case, give them a UBI so that they can house themselves. So, making sure that from a universal aspect that it's going to be, I think, more challenging to make sure that no one is missed, as opposed to worrying about a few people that might be trying to cheat the system going forward, or not deserving it, or whatever reason. Trying to create an us and them scenario, because that requires time and effort and money. If you're going to try and start policing it, who's going to do the policing? Who's going to go out and have a look and decide, this person shouldn't be getting it, but they're getting it? How do we make sure that's just ludicrous? You just start creating the bureaucracy that we have around the welfare system at the moment again, to make sure that a few people who don't deserve it, don't get it. I think that's a crazy way of thinking. We really should be trying to make sure that everyone who deserves it does get it. And everyone does deserve it. It's not who deserves it, but everyone deserves it. So that's the universal side of things. I don't know if you want to add or make a comment.
First of all, I agree with everything you said. And secondly, something that people don't think about when they think about UBI, in my opinion, is that the fact that every single person is going to receive the same amount is a change in thinking. Currently, there's not a single country on the planet where women earn as much as men do, or where black men earn as much as white men do. So once we change to a UBI and everyone is valued at the same cost or the same price or the same income, that will change thinking behind it as well, because then at that point, every single person has the same value. And I believe it will cause a shift in thinking that people don't have at the forefront of their mind at the moment. There's a lot happening in the world right now. Not everyone is thinking about UBI as much as you or I do. And I think that one of the unintended consequences of the UBI will be more equality, because at least in this one point, everyone will be equal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of additional benefits to UBI just by making it universal. So the second component of UBI is basic. I mean, people make throwaway comments like an affordable UBI, is insufficient, and a sufficient UBI would be unaffordable, without really having any basis for making that statement. The affordability of UBI will, from an accounting perspective, just from a tax perspective, these calculations have been done. We can do it for different countries, but if you just take it from a high level point of view, global GDP at the moment is currently over 100 trillion, right? And even if we say that there's 10 billion people in the world, that's 10,000 US dollars per person per year. Right, so there's from that perspective alone, there is enough money in the world. It's just how do we distribute it? And when I say $10,000 per person per year, that's rich and poor countries. Not every person is going to need $10,000 per year. And I think starting off at when people talk about a UBI, they talk about $1,000 per month, which is $12,000 per year in the US, as if that is going to be a sufficient amount as a starting point. And I agree that it's a good starting point. And if you consider the fact that there is actually enough money in the world at the moment, that what we need to do is look at how we distribute that and how do we make sure that it gets to where to people so that they can make a contribution to society, as opposed to the current system where a few rich people, the top 1%, as everyone calls it, are the ones that decide where the money gets spent and how the money gets spent. And worse so, let's spend it on wars so that we can claim land and more, whatever reasons they want to claim the land for themselves. I mean, it's just from a financial point of view. Anyway, I'll go off track a bit because it's the talk about whether it's affordable or not. This is the point. I think what we need to focus on is the fact that it covers your basic needs. Now, some people talk about it needs to be above the poverty line, which I think is a good description. How do we draw the poverty line? I mean, the poverty line changes in different countries at different poverty levels. The global poverty line has changed from the $1 a day to $1.25. I think it may even be $1.50 or $2.50 or something. But whatever the poverty definition is in the country, the rich third world countries are very much higher poverty lines. I think $12.50 a day or $25 a day come to mind as a basic poverty line. Now, I quite like the definition that half the median income is the poverty line. So if a country across the entire population earns a certain amount, and we calculate not the average, because that gets very much distorted by some seriously rich people who earn a hell of a lot more, but the median income. And quite often in countries like the UK, for example, I know that the median income is around £25,000 a year. That's a reasonable income for anybody working in the UK. I'm sure they can all agree that that's not a great income, but it is a reasonable income, whether you live in London or whether you live in the countryside. Obviously, depends. It will make a difference as to whether you think that's sufficient or not. But it's currently the median income in the UK, and median income means that half the people earn less than that, and half the people earn more than that. That's where the halfway point is from people's point of view. The average income is the average GDP per person. That's around twice that, to give you a difference between median and average in the UK, for example. Now, the poverty line, if we say that half the median income is the poverty line for a country, then we have a figure of, again, within the UK of £12,500 as a starting point to cover basic needs. And I think most people would agree that you would be able to find somewhere to live, maybe not in the most expensive part of London, but you'll be able to find somewhere to live, somewhere to feed yourself, clothe yourself, and house yourself. with that kind of income. Where you choose to live is up to you, obviously, but that would be a starting point, I think, going forward from a basic point of view. And I think that's affordable. So these comments about affordable UBIs being insufficient and sufficient UBIs being unaffordable, I think is a throwaway comment to try and distract away from the important issue. Is that what should we be doing about addressing what is basic? And I think half the median income of a country is a good definition for basic going forward, which is also the good definition for the poverty line. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
No, I simply agree because we are aligned on this topic, and I can't stress enough when we're talking about basic, it does not mean luxurious holidays or living in a mansion. It's just basic needs. So you're comfortable, you are well off enough to take care of all of your needs, and that's that. It doesn't need to be more than that to have a good life and a decent and a valuable life as well. And that's all there is to it.
No, exactly. And when people talk about who's going to pay for it, it's a taxation of the rich, right? And it's going to be the people that earn above the median, right, that are going to get taxed more than they get from UBI.
Yes.
Yeah, simple as that. If you're earning more than the median, you're going to get taxed your UBI away. So you will still be receiving a UBI, as everybody will receive a UBI. But by the time you finish paying your tax bill, you have given all your UBI back as taxes going forward. People below the median income will be a net positive in their account going forward. I think if we just look at it from that perspective, and obviously the richer you are, the more you'll be contributing, till eventually you'll be a net contributor to the UBI from a taxation point of view. And that's how we're going to need to structure the taxation to make it affordable going forward. And looking at the exact numbers and where those points come into play, I think it's an easy way to look at it from that perspective. So if you are earning more than the median income, don't expect a UBI to be making a big change in your life, because you already are better than half the population, better off than half the population going forward. The other aspect to the UBI, where people have said, is that if a UBI doesn't increase with inflation, then it'll eventually become worthless. And I think, again, a UBI has to remain a UBI in the sense that it has to rise with the cost of living, and it will do A, from what is the median income point of view, and B, what is the poverty line. If we're not making sure that a UBI still covers the poverty line, no matter what the inflation rate is, it's no longer a UBI. And then again, so if we just focus on the definition of what a UBI is, it's a basic income. And if you've defined the basic income as half the median income, which is also known as the poverty line, then we keep it like that, and it gets revised, with inflation. When we look at the figures again, we decide, okay, what is the poverty line now? And that's what a UBI needs to be. And I think as more and more people, if we do manage to tax the super rich and tax billionaires back into the millionaire bracket, as Bill Gates said, you can take 99% of my money and I'm still going to be rich. They can lose a lot of their wealth without affecting their lifestyles. That will significantly raise the median income going forward, and bring it closer to the average, which is ideally where we want to be. And that will also in itself bring the UBI up. So as equality from an income perspective increases, then we're also going to have a UBI naturally increasing as well. So people are better off as the equality increases going forward. Mm-hmm. So I think just by focusing on the definition of basic and making sure it's a clear and easily defined number based on each country, then we know what a basic income is, and it's also an affordable income, just from looking at the taxation perspective as well, using those same numbers.
Yes. There was one comment from a follower on Mastodon around, well, but what if the government is going to reduce the UBI rate and they're going to move it down to close to zero to to say that yes, we have UBI, but in effect it would be basically $1 a month or something. And I believe you have answered that point really well, that it is only a UBI if people can actually live on it and have a dignified life,
Yes.
not be starving themselves because they don't have enough money for food, not be homeless or without shelter if they don't, if because they can't afford it. But that is the answer to that. It is only UBI if you actually can live with it or can live
Yeah.
on it.
I mean, people forget the B part of UBI. They think any form of universal income, be it a citizen's dividend or whatever, is also UBI. It's not a UBI because if it doesn't cover the basic needs, if it doesn't meet the poverty line, then it's not a basic income. It's not a universal basic income. It's that B aspect that's vitally important, that we focus on. So talking about just giving everyone a little bit of money, right, is great for these pilots that they give to extremely poor people because they can keep the money quite low. But it's not a basic income unless it's basically above the poverty line. So it allows them to stay out of poverty, basically.
Yes.
Nothing more and less than that. So it's we need to make sure that it's the B part of the UBI is part of the definition when we introduce the UBI.
Yes. And with that, on to the I.
Yes, I think the other thing is it's the income aspect. There's less controversy around this, but I think there's a lot of people that still think, a way to do it would be, negative taxation or, some other mechanism to be able to, food vouchers so that people only spend the money on food or rent or whatever else, other form of vouchers, to try and control, that income aspect again. And I understand in a way, and in principle, what people want to try and control things. It's similar, to the beggar in the street, where people don't want to give the beggar money; they want to rather give them food. But it's not food that they need. They quite often have enough food because people keep giving them food, but that doesn't help them get them off the street. It helps them feed themselves for the day, but half the time, they got too much food because people give them food, and trying to say, but they're just going to spend it on cigarettes and alcohol. Fine. If they've decided they've spent enough money on food, let them spend it on cigarettes and alcohol. If they would rather, do that with their money, then that's their decision. I mean, that's just from a homeless perspective. I've always said, just give people the money and let them choose what they want to do with that money. I think it's vitally important that if you have people that are addicts, whether they're drug, alcohol, whatever, and they've got other reasons to be taking that, you're not going to control that by giving them food vouchers, right? There needs to be some other mechanism to help them with those addictions. It's like people who try and make homelessness illegal. You're not addressing the homeless problem by making it illegal. You're going to have to arrest them and then you house them in a prison cell. And that's an expensive way to house someone, in a prison cell. It's the human dignity of giving someone money and respecting them to make the decision as to how they want to spend their money. And I go as far as you heard me earlier talking about children. When children decide that they want to receive the UBI for themselves, so they can decide what they want to spend their money on, that's fine as well. They should be allowed to do that. We should have enough respect for a child who is mature enough to know that a UBI exists and to know how to make a claim, say that the UBI goes to them and to their bank account and not their parents' bank account, then they are smart enough to make a decision to do what to do with that money. If they are still living with their parents and living rent-free, great, then let them spend their money on computer games and whatever else. It's that usual argument of what about the people that are going to take all the UBI, not work, and just laze around and drink and play video games. It's like, fine, let them do that, right? Most of the time people do that because they're absolutely exhausted from the lifestyles that we've been forced onto them through the working structure that we currently have in the system. Right? I guarantee you that after you've been playing video games for several months, you're going to get bored and you're going to want to find something more interesting to do. The only reason you want to keep drinking is A, you've got an addiction, we've addressed that earlier, or B, because the thought of actually going to work in a terrible little job, right, is so appalling that you'd rather find any excuse to just end up in the pub. It's a distraction technique going forward. Trying to not address the going to look for a job and things like that. I think if you don't force people into the job market and force people to do things, then yes, they will eventually have had that holiday, recharge themselves enough to then stand up and go and find something to do. I think people naturally want to contribute. People want to have a purpose in life. People want to be able to do that. So letting people decide what they want to do with their money, I think, is the first step in showing people respect, right? So they can then decide going forward not only what they want to spend their UBI on, but also what they want to do with their time. And I think that is the biggest benefit of UBI, is not just that you're giving people money so they can cover their basic needs, but also you're giving them an opportunity to decide what they want to do with their time. And I think trying to control how they spend the money is just a sign of disrespect, and not allowing people to choose just how they spend their money, never mind how they spend their time, is just a terrible way of approaching life.
I completely agree. And most studies that looked at the impact of UBI pilots have confirmed that visits to the A&E are down, depression rates are down, burnout is down, all of those things that are a result of our current capitalistic work-life model. All of those side effects disappear really quickly. And I know a few people who are sitting at home, not doing much, apparently not doing much. But once you get to know those people and engage with them, you actually find out they have hobbies. They may not be able to live on them full time if they only continued with the hobby, or not for the first few years, but all of them are doing something that they're interested in. And why not allow them to do that? You never know what is going to come out of it. What's the end result of something like that? I mean, for example, Charles Darwin, do you really think he would have had the opportunity to come up with the theory of evolution had he needed to work from 9 to 5 every single day? I don't know. I'm just thinking about the possibilities here. As you said, if people can do what they choose to do rather than what they're forced to do. And on the flip side, because there's always a dark side to it, if you think of those people who are sitting at home and doing nothing, the people that you label lazy, do you really want them to be your colleague or your secretary or maybe even your manager? Somebody like that may, through sheer luck, end up to be your manager. Would you really want them to manage you every single minute of every single day in your job? Do you really want them around? I wouldn't want them. You may be able to think of one or two of those people in your current job. So think about it. Would you prefer to have every single person you work with being fully engaged and motivated and capable of what they're doing? Or do you want the people who half the time their mind is on something else? Think about it. I just see the benefits and the positives of UBI and how it could benefit everyone, irrespective of whether they stay in the current job or not.
I think also just the mere fact when you ask people if they won the lottery, would they quit their job? Some people would, some people wouldn't. And I think the people that immediately say, yeah, I quit my job, hate their jobs. And there will always be people that immediately, the first thing they do is quit their jobs. Considering the fact that a UBI is a basic income, right? It's not really an incentive to quit your job unless you really are earning poverty wages. Then you probably going to stay in your job because you're still going to be better off by staying in your job going forward. You just have the guarantee that if anything goes wrong with your job, right, for whatever reason you decide you want to quit, you want to look for a new job, you want to change your career, you want to do something different, you are able to. You have that opportunity going forward because you know that your basic costs are going to be covered going forward. If you've got a huge mortgage and expensive car to pay off, then you need to make a decision whether you want to stay in the job that earns you an income enough to pay that off, or whether you want to downsize. It's the same problem that anyone always has before they quit a job. The only difference now is that if you decide that you want to become an entrepreneur, you want to go for that hobby, and see whether it can actually make it into an income source of income, that you have the safety net that a lot of rich people have when they decide to become this entrepreneur. They have a safety net provided by their parents or their trust fund or whatever, that they always know that they're going to be able to afford the house or the food and clothing and things like that. And that's what we're offering people going forward. And just imagine, if you have a lot more entrepreneurs who are able to take that chance. We could putting these entrepreneurs on pedestals, right? But the reason half of them are able to do that is because they have a safety net. And if we provide everyone with a safety net, imagine what you're going to get out of it. And I can understand the resistance to UBI, because if you're a boss who relies on people working for you for pittance, and I can think of a lot of billionaires that do that with their employees, yes, those people are going to quit. But imagine how difficult your job must be and how horrible your job must be if you're forced to drag yourself in there every day just so that you can cover the rent. And there are people that are doing this 3 times. We talk about these single mothers that are working 3 jobs, right, just to cover their rent and their food for the children. That's the benefit. And I think we have the poverty aspect to it, but we also have every individual out there who thinks, I've got an idea, if only. And we're addressing that if only aspect, allowing people to go forward. But I think most people, the same with the lottery. They win the lottery, they're going to stick with their job. If you enjoy your job, why? Why would you quit? But yeah, it's that aspect to it.
Yes.
Different topic from a definition of a UBI, but I think people worrying about what will happen. It's I think it's a preconception of what they think might happen. But if you ask them themselves, would they quit their job? Most of them would say no. Right? And the people that say yes, absolutely, I'd quit my job immediately, then why they're not for UBI? Because they would benefit most from it. But if you're sitting there thinking, "Oh, I wouldn't quit my job if I got a UBI," then why do you care whether there's a UBI or not? Do you want to keep poor people back? Is there some sense that they don't deserve it? Because then we get back to that whole, some people don't deserve it, this discussion that we had from the universal aspect earlier.
And again, it's been documented in most pilot studies that if you give people money, the labor participation actually goes up. So people either they quit the job in order to find a better job or to find a job that they really enjoy and want and carry on in the long run, rather than just because they need to pay the rent. Alternatively, a lot of people, especially on the younger end, started going to university. So they're learning to train for a job. The only group of people that temporarily left the workforce were parents, in particular single parents who wanted to take care of their children full time rather than stick it out in a low wage paying job. And as soon as the children were old enough, or as soon as there was childcare available, those people also went back to work. And a large proportion of those who did quit the job also, as you rightly said, they opened their own companies. They tried to make something of themselves.
Yeah, and I'm sure that those UBI pilots didn't include a UBI for the child, which would
That is
make a
correct.
difference.
That is correct, yes. At least not that I've heard of. So if any one of you lovely YouTube watchers out there, if you know about a pilot study where the children also received money, do tell us. Do write in, get in touch. We would love to hear about studies like that. So do get in touch. Overall, I still don't see a downside to UBI. The whole who's paying for it? Well, it's the people who are currently not paying, in my opinion, the rich, the super rich, and the I don't even know or didn't know that people are that rich people. Corporation tax, in my opinion, is also a little bit on the low side in comparison to normal people. maybe something needs to be done there. But it is possible. The maths pans out. It works. It can be done even in the rich Western countries. And personally, I think it is a better option to start now, start implementing it now, whilst there are still jobs and whilst the economy is still going the way it does. Thinking about automation, robotics, and AI. A lot is happening in that space. And yes, at times it feels as if it's a setback. It feels as if it's a hype. It feels as if it's not quite as good as promised. Personally, though, I think humanity will overcome those challenges, and the day when some AI robot algorithm machine will be just as smart, if not smarter, than human beings is relatively close. It will happen in my lifetime, I assume. I guess, based on what I've read so far. So, what are we going to do then? Do you really think there will still be jobs the way we know them right now? I don't know. I think that's the reason to start now with the UBI, see how successful it is, and then adapt to how the world is changing around us. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
Thinking about the Mastodon notification or comment that we received. So we have addressed a fair few of the points already in terms of, well, what if the UBI is set to close to zero? We've talked about that one. We've talked about some of the political issues around the UBI. Uh, and the way I understood the comment, and please go and have a look at our Mastodon. Please read it for yourself. It's always important to have a first-hand opinion. The feeling I got was very much around the government as a system, a cold system, an uncaring system. This uncaring system doesn't care about people, and therefore people are left behind. Personally, I think that the government is a collection of people. For example, in a small village of a few hundred or a few thousand people, you may even know the mayor, you may know the people who are on the council. And that's the same system that countries have on a larger scale. The difference being in, say, in the US, there are 300 odd million people. The chances of you knowing the president or anybody who's in the Senate or in Congress are smaller. Or in other large countries, it's a similar situation. It's unlikely that you personally directly know somebody who works in the government. In a smaller country, say Iceland, which I have visited twice so far. Every single time I got to speak to people who know the president, either the president or somebody in parliament directly, personally, and they hang out with them every now and then. Simply because there are fewer people, so it's more likely you are in touch with them. So to me, government, sorry.
No, I'm going to say that that is the individual's responsibility to go and find out who their local representative is, and go speak to them, call them, write to them, make contact with them. You have that ability to contact your local representative, whether it's for your state or whether it's for the country. You have access to those people. And if you don't vote for them. Vote for someone who does provide access. Simple as that. You may say, "Oh, I don't know who my representative is." That's on you. It's your responsibility to find out who your representative is, and if there's an issue that you think needs to be addressed, make sure they're aware of that. If you're not making them aware of it, then it's on you. You choose who you vote for. If you don't have no access to the person, don't vote for them. Find the person that does have access, that you do have access to. Find the person that does listen to your concerns and your issues, and vote for them. Or stand for for election yourself. It's another thing that a UBI will provide people with, the ability to go into politics if that's what they want to do. They can quit their job and become a politician. It's not just restricted to rich people going forward. Who can afford to spend time campaigning and have the connections to find the money to support their campaigns. Everyone will be able to stand up, go around and go speak to people and become involved in politics if that's what they want to do. But at the very least, it's up to you to find out who your representative is and go speak to them and find out what they think about UBI. And if they dismiss it as something that they're not interested in because they like the current system, they like the power structure that's in place at the moment, they like the fact that poor people kept poor, find someone else to vote for or stand for yourself if there's no one to vote for.
I completely agree. And I think that covers that topic pretty well. This is also everything from me for today. Is there anything, any burning topics on your plate at the moment, Marcel?
Oh, there's lots to talk about, but I think we can save it for next time.
True, next time. Everyone out there is welcome to join us. It would be great to have other people on the call as well. As you can see, it's just a nice conversation about the benefits of UBI, but also addressing the concerns some people have around it and our view on it. Do join us. Also, I do need to mention here that we are currently not taking any money in. We do have some running costs for hosting and a little bit of technology. So if you would like to support us, please go to our website. We have a Patreon and we also have Stripe where you can donate either on a monthly basis or as a one-off donation. So if you want to help spread the word, help us spread it with you. And with that, I wish you a really nice rest of the week, and we see each other next month, first Tuesday of the month at 4 in the afternoon, UTC. See you then. Bye bye.
Bye.